Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and this is my top 10 movies of 2019. Top 10 lists are sort of an interesting thing to do because I don't know if I mentally really rank things in my head. I don't know if ranking is necessarily my favorite thing to do, but I still, when I look at someone's rankings, will get really upset at them or go, that was a good ranking or something like that. So I definitely understand the purpose of it, but I like more discussing the film and seeing different kinds of movies and quality and things like that. But I still know you sort of have to do one. So this is my entry of that. I tried to do the best I could. There's plenty of movies I didn't see. You can see on my 2019 reviews playlist. I don't know. It's hard to see everything, and it gets harder and harder between having a full-time job and a family, a child, and cats, and I don't know, Trump maybe, I don't know, a lot of things just prevent me from being able to see everything I want to. So in that mind, I try is what I have to say about trying to see as many good things as I can. But I do feel good about this list. I have seen all the best pictures. I think some of those reviews aren't out yet, but I have seen them all. So if that is something you're wondering, I'm sure maybe you won't agree with them. If you don't, and there's one on the top 10, you can just say it's my number one or whatever and make yourself feel better. You don't have to get that upset. I always say that, but nobody, I don't think, does that, but whatever. To get into the top 10, I am going to have one tie, and it's a 10. But let's get into it. So here are my top 10 movies of 2019. So number 10, they're two really huge movies, and part of I want to explain this because part of my thing with top 10 lists, and I agree with this, when you make a list, it's mainly recommendations. How I got into film and how a lot of people got into film is looking at these lists and going like, hey, I need to see some of these movies. And I would argue that these two do not need to be recommended to you at all because most of you have seen both of them. In fact, you've probably seen both of them multiple times, and there's like literally no reason you need to see them again. However, you probably should see the rest of these movies. But I still think they're really great. And I think one of them is probably the most 2019 movie and probably the greatest achievement that blockbuster cinema did that year. And it's something, that no one could really top and probably should be taken more seriously. And it is a really good movie. So I'll talk about that one first and then the other one. But I will say, I think in number 10, a tie, the first one being Avengers Endgame. There's so many times, I think, in these team-up movies where they really need to use the continuity or the other films to kind of nail those emotional things. But a lot in this film was organic to the film itself. And I think that played off a lot better. Much like how you saw in Civil War, but I think this was done even better than that. And I think this is the Russos' fourth film with them, third team-up movie. You can tell their strong point is using those two characters, to show the cost and the damage that Thanos had caused and what they really had to go against and sacrifice to finally get that to be destroyed. And that feeling you have in your bones when you watch them go through that is effective character beats and effective character development to the point that you really care and you have to see them finish it. And the real triumph of the MCU and Marvel Comics is getting you to feel and getting you to understand and getting you to connect with these characters in such a way that you feel this triumphant big moment with a movie that's cost $400 million or something. That's blockbuster Hollywood cinema at its finest and at its best. You couldn't talk about 2019 not talk about Endgame. I just feel like it's too big of a movie. And it was really good. I think we all acknowledge it was really good. My other tie at number 10, and is another huge billion-dollar movie, I'm pretty sure billion-dollar movie, is Toy Story 4. I think Pixar are cinephiles. They care about the intelligence of movies and storytelling and what you can say with those things, but they are also entertainers. And I think that's something, a 4-quadrant animated film can do really well because you are appealing to a wider range audience, particularly in the theaters. And I don't know of many that really try to do that as well as Pixar does. This was just a very smart film and a beautiful film. I laughed so much. I had such a good time. I had such a good time with my daughter, and I got to think about death as well. So overall, it was a well-rounded experience at the movies. This movie will probably be a special movie for me, which is something I didn't think this one would do. When I was thinking about Toy Story and this franchise, I was thinking about, the first film really meant something to me. I don't know if the second one really ever did, but 3 kind of represented, I'm an adult now and I've grown up, and I'm seeing this film, and it's about toys and moving on and so forth. I took my daughter to this film, and it kind of represents, you have to know the time to move on and grow from something. It shows me kind of that full circle of adult life is not just understanding to take responsibility, not just understanding you can do everything, but also understanding when to tip your hat away and what is the right thing to do for not just yourself, but for the people you love. All right, so now we're into the movies that didn't make $1 billion, right? Yes. Spoilers, I guess. Anyway, so number 9 of the top 10 movies of 2019 is Uncut Gems. I found this to be one of the better crime films I've seen in a little bit, and one that is more about the chaotic nature of everything going on as much as it is about the kind of predicament that they're in, but that kind of makes it all that more inviting and interesting. And I think the Safdie brothers are good at not only showing you the story of all this yelling and screaming and chaos, but steering you through it in a way that kind of makes you fall into that world and understand sort of the chaos, but also not, because it is chaos, and that makes it all that more crazy and scary and intense. And I just left the theater leaving almost like, what the fuck was that? I don't think that was the normal kind of crime film, but it also gave me the intensity of it. And it's also crazy that the film almost gives up on being this intense thing while also being this intense thing. It's so many different things. I think you're just scared for him because you know everything that he's doing. And I sort of think he does, but you also think he doesn't. And that makes him scarier, and that makes this film all that more intense. And number 8, Little Women. I do sort of feel like, in a way, the way it's adapted sort of reminds me of what happened with fairy tales, where for a long time we had these very traditionally told animated films, and then Shrek happened, and suddenly we have to sort of acknowledge that we're very aware this is a fairy tale and all the problems with it. And I don't think this has a problem with the source material, but I think it's like saying, you've seen this so many times, we have to do it differently. But I think there is some cause for doing it traditionally so a new generation can experience that. But in some ways, maybe it needed to be loosened up to continue to be as relevant as it has been these past 150 years. In a lot of ways, I think Greta Gerwig has sort of basically done that while still being very traditional. She's just done kind of an amazing job doing this adaptation of Little Women. It's just in the canon of Little Women adaptations, it's one that I think kind of stands on its own, but stands on its own in a way that I don't think replaces anything. It kind of, and not to say each one needs to replace it, but I think it kind of lets you enjoy the older ones while also seeing this one, and you can enjoy both for entirely separate reasons, and particularly for the way they adapted. They kind of almost feels like it plays off of one another rather than trying to play the same song as one another, which I think is probably one of the more interesting things about this. And I honestly am so surprised, because it feels like when we get kind of more literary kind of adaptations, they try to say it very traditional and literal, and as much as it's shot that way and costumed that way and the production design is that way, the direction chose not to be that way, and it's so much more radical, I think, as an adaptation, as a film, than it really has any right to be. Number 7, I feel like this was such a number 6, 5, 6, 7. I could go back and forth with. I think my top 4 is pretty solid, but yeah. Anyway, number 7, you kind of can't not talk about this movie. I think it's probably one of the best made movies, just because it's so hard to achieve that kind of thing. And they did it quite fantastically. And it just, when this movie comes up, I have such visceral images of it, and it's just sort of hard to forget about. That is, at number 7, The Lighthouse. They're stuck on this lighthouse, and it is maddening. It's a maddening situation. They don't like each other, and they're almost sort of done. But are they done, and will they ever get out of here? And kind of the mysticism that you kind of believe in, because, why wouldn't you believe killing a seagull is bad luck? You would believe that because, what else do you have at this point? It kind of goes into the idea of, why people were that certain way then, and kind of almost understanding it in a way that's not in a way that go wow, look how fucking stupid they are. It's more looking at it and go, well, this is why they kind of thought that, because this is their life day in and day out, and why would you not think things like that? The Lighthouse gets into existence in such a way that you would never really see that kind of existence and that understanding of an existence from most period films. Most period films want to tell a story kind of in the modern context, say something about modern life through that period film, like Jojo Rabbit recently is a great example of that. But Eggers isn't interested in that as much, unless I'm completely misreading things, which is highly possible. But I think Robert Eggers is interested in kind of existing and understanding that time, and understanding the madness of that time, and understanding the way people lived at that time. And really, like, that's what makes his film so kind of imaginative and different, and that kind of divorcedness completely from a modern life. But at the same time, since we are so modern, and since, you know, if I want to find out what time the subway is coming, I can just look it up on my phone on my walk to the subway and so forth. It is absolutely horrific to look at these people. So in some sense, it's completely divorced of it. It's not talking about a modern issue or a modern thing happening in politics or something like that, but at the same time, using the whole ethos of who we are at the exact time that we are right now is very much in his work. Because if you look at The Witch and you look at The Lighthouse, both of them have this ingrained sense in them, which is one of the major parts of horror, is not understanding something, and how that's the most horrific thing. And that was something that was 100% true in the past, is like, people were not as educated, people did not get as much education, you didn't know if you were sometimes getting paid. If you're at a lighthouse and you have enough demerits, you wouldn't get paid at all, so you've just been out like months and months of work. That's horrific. Like, you know, and he's honestly, like, going through the whole movie, you sort of realize how horrific it just had to be normal. That's scary. But then having all this madness go on, and whether like the lighthouse has, like, you know, God in it, or, you know, the gulls have a spirit, or whether like the mermaids he's seeing are in it, you know, and it sounds crazier. And also there's lots of farts. I mean, there's not that many farts, but they do bring up farts a lot, which is surprising. And number 6, another kind of horror filmmaker and horror film that I really quite liked, and I feel like is maybe underappreciated. But that may be because it's more of an entry in a horror filmmaker's filmography, an interesting entry, than it is maybe a breaking the mold, making people contemplate. Well, it makes you contemplate a lot of stuff. I don't know. I just thought it was really fantastic. A lot of these films, I think, one of the themes of 2019, I think, is going to be wealth and wealth disparity and privilege, and the idea that one class gets to automatically be above another. And it's something that I think a lot of the films on my top 10 dealt with, but I think it's a theme that is quite prevalent in film, and is quite a theme that's prevalent in like culture and life and stuff. One of the films I thought that did that really well, it's maybe not getting the credit it deserves for that, is number 6 with Us. It's a big auteur kind of statement. It sort of reminds me of Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson's his big celebrated film, Boogie Nights. I know he had Hard 8, but Magnolia feels more like a sophomore film than Boogie Nights does. And Magnolia is this big auteur, crazy, big statement, and Jordan Peele has done that with Us. This is far more complex. There's far more meaning in this. He definitely has something to prove in terms of, if you thought, oh, is he going to go to be a thriller director or something like that? And remember, he turned down Akira and doing $100 million movies. He wanted to make horror films, and this is a horror director kind of movie. This is a horror director filmography type of film. I get traces of Romero, I get traces of Wes Craven, I get ideas that you can see from John Carpenter. Like, you get the big horror auteurs within this. Like, Jordan Peele wants to be a horror director. It wasn't like a one-off weird experiment, even though in that he's playing with the genre, and you could understand how he uses genre and uses film to say something, and he definitely did that with that film. This is more of a wholly original idea presented to you from someone who understands the usage and importance of horror with a metaphor. The metaphor is more looser and broad and so forth, and maybe not as directed, but it's there. And Us, I think, brings that out of itself. It is there to be a powerful kind of statement, but also be kind of an entertaining movie. It's first and foremost, when I'm in the audience of that film, like hearing people like scream and laugh and be relieved and scared, it felt like that was the most important part. It reminded me of James Wan in the theater. This is when I was seeing the film, the experience of it. It felt like James Wan, but more effective, more smarter than what James Wan is doing. James Wan, when he's doing a Conjuring film, he wants to scare you. It's a fun house, kind of haunted house sort of movie. When Jordan Peele's doing it, there's a reason he wants you to be scared, and there's a reason behind that. It's like if James Wan had a brain, I guess, because, you know, he did direct Aquaman, so that's like his thing. You see that throughout this film, is him as an entertainer as much as a horror director, and I think that's so amazing, because you don't see this from mainstream Hollywood filmmakers anymore. None of them want to have the amount of meaning and layers that are within this film, and it's just frankly sort of beautiful about it. I love that about Us, and what it's saying about everything, what it's saying about ideas, what it's saying about horror, what you can do with horror, that you can have an auteur horror film film. I mean, this is as close to something like John Carpenter's The Fog that I've ever seen, and it kind of is going out on the limb, like a horror director basically going like, I will die on this hill, and he means it with us, and that is a hell of a powerful statement. And number 5, this film kind of came on the scene, and I think at first it was just this really great animated film, and then it slowly became like sort of a Christmas classic in my house, and I'm really happy with that, because I think this film first came on as like a big animation movie, and slowly, because it's so good, kind of won us all over and really just showed us it's like probably one of the great entries into the Christmas movie canon, and that is number 5 with Klaus. Almost every shot of this film, as beautiful as it is and as wonderfully animated as it is, and I can totally understand someone, a student of animation or a fan of animation, just poring over this thing, analyzing every shot and how beautifully it moves and flows and everything like that. But because those frames and those shots are able to tell such a magnificent story, it's able to say so much more. Sure, we've been wanting to see this because of the animation for all this time, but what I think they're really able to do with this film is use this animation to be this amazing storytelling tool, to tell like a really great story about like how Jasper was able to bring all these people together and, you know, quote unquote start Santa Claus or something. I kind of really like that about this film. You know, I think of this more of the film about Jasper and his selfless kind of gift to the world, rather than, you know, a story about the origin of Santa Claus. I mean, that's like there and stuff, but it almost feels like the story in itself is more of what would maybe be the tagline that sort of drags you in after having seen it. I really like this film. I think it's one of the more modern Christmas classics if I've ever seen one. You know, I do think maybe some of the origin Santa Claus stuff might be a little lame or something, but I honestly feel like any real problems with this film are essentially very minor. The power of this film is so much greater than that you fall in love with it so quickly. It feels like the kind of animation you almost like dream of, the things that this medium can really do, and I think Klaus is ready to do that, and it's able to, like, you know, appeal to all audiences, as we could all watch it as an entire family, and I don't think there's a lot of films that can necessarily do that as well, and I think it just has such a magnificent sort of wonderful power to it that true Christmas movies really do. All right, so my top 4, pretty much these films have been films that I have really stuck with this whole year, and this is probably the film that came out the earliest, right? Yes, I'd say so, of any film this year. It's one that not a lot of people talked about, and I was unfortunate, and it's probably one that I didn't even put the review out till way too late, which is unfortunate. But I think it's a film that says a lot about our current digital age and media consumption, and how much power these older media companies have, and the kind of why is that still going on and questioning it. It's more of a theoretical film. It was all shot on an iPhone by Steven Soderbergh, and it's a film that's currently on Netflix. I think it's really great. And unfortunately not enough people are talking about it, but I have to say it's a film that I can't stop thinking about and the theories within it. And that would be number 4 with High Flying Bird. It is kind of interesting for someone to take sports in this way because it broadens your idea of what sports is and who's consuming it, I think. But I would actually think it's one of the more interesting sports movies I've seen in a long time, because it's more about the inner workings of all of that, really. And Soderbergh seems to be interested in it. I've heard some people say it's a heist film. I think it's almost a heist film that it's not even really a heist. It's almost saying like, this is ending, but it hasn't ended. And a lot of this has to do with TV rights and the validity of that, and having these institutions, and how much legs these old white dudes who have lots of money, how much power they really wield anymore because of things like Facebook and Twitch, and they don't say Twitch though, and Twitter and all these things where people have their own power of social media. Do we really need the TV networks anymore the way we used to? Do they yield as much power? And I think this is kind of coming to the impasse with sports in particular, which used to be like the kind of financial bedrock of all these networks. Like, you feel impenetrable, and I know, like, with the financial dealings of ESPN not looking as good as it used to, and other things like that it doesn't seem to be as solid, really, now that we have better analytics. There's less people than they thought that were into sports, but the other situation is that people don't need to revolve on these things. You know, if someone wanted to make their own basketball league or something, they would go off and do it. It's just the money that's in these bigger things, and I think they kind of know that time is limited when the shift really starts to happen. And it's sort of like interesting because I think this is a heist film. This is a film a lot about what Andre Holland's character is really doing, a lot about manipulation. Number 3, this is a film that I think got underappreciated. It's probably a better riff on Martin Scorsese than the film that everyone is unfortunately talking way too much about. That is another riff on Martin Scorsese. But this I thought was a little more clever, particularly its riff on Goodfellas, which I recognize I don't think a lot of people did, but that's whatever. But I still think what this film did was saying, and what it was saying about female friendships, and a real kind of like movie star performance from Jennifer Lopez. And it was a film my wife and I like kept talking about, or still talking about, and I think it's a definite own on Blu-ray. I don't actually know when it comes out on Blu-ray, but I still just, this was just such a big movie for us. And we love seeing it in the theaters, and I just really like this movie a lot, and I keep thinking about it, and that would be number 3 with Hustlers. In some ways it's more the perspective of the movie or how they did it than the actual subject matter, but in a lot of ways I found that the whole package of Hustlers to be a really compelling, really special, really awesome kind of crime movie. One of the more fun crime movies because it focused more on why they were doing this in the first place and how they were shepherded and what really mattered to these characters, whether that's true or not. In terms of the real life perspective, I haven't read the article yet. I would like to, but I really was just kind of in love with this film, but also had a lot of fun with it. There's not a lot of fun crime movies in a post-recession world that also wants to deal with all those issues more and more seriously and more confronting them than a lot of those films that want to be as serious about it as they usually are. And I quite really liked this film. I think it probably actually does it a little better than that Big Short movie, which this and that are produced by the same people. But I think in a lot of ways this makes a more interesting case for it and kind of confronts a lot of things about the male ego and all those things going on with the economic collapse that went into all of that, while also having a sick cameo from Usher. I think this film is kind of, in a lot of ways, the real full package of doing something like this, wrapped up in an entertaining Hollywood film. It's kind of an ultimate kind of Hollywood thing, because you get a star performance, you get to talk about something that's on everyone's mind, you get to tackle a major issue, and you get to make it entertaining with everyone having a good time and having a cry and having a great story. That's what a great Hollywood movie is, and I think in a lot of ways Hustlers is one of the great Hollywood movies of this year. Okay, and number 2, if anything, this will be the controversial one because I sort of am skating the rules on this. But I'm also like, I didn't do it with all the other things. I guess I did it before with a movie way back in like 2013 with Beyond the Candelabra, which was a Soderbergh film. But this, I'm probably pushing the rules. But in terms of cinema and movies and the cinematic landscape and things like that, I thought this really was did a really amazing job. And I sort of like don't want to just not include it, because to me it was like probably one of the great kind of movie kind of experiences. And it did play in theaters, although in an edited version that cuts out the final part, apparently. I didn't see it in theaters. But to me, it was like one of the great cinematic experiences this year. And I kind of wish it'd get more acclaim. I understand there's a lot of great animated stuff this year. I really couldn't not talk about it because I thought it did a really great job. And if this is a recommendation kind of thing, I'd say this is probably one of the films I would recommend the most. Even if it's not a movie technically, but to me, it was shot and it pushes that boundary more than any TV show I've really seen. So I'm going to do it. This is pretty liberal of me, I guess. I've never done this sort of thing this high. But my number 2 best movies of the year is Primal. This is a statement from an auteur saying, like, look at what I can do, but also I'm going to have a lot of fun doing it. And we don't get to see that. We don't get to see people do those things. And certainly I understand when you get to adult animation, there's that kind of overreaction to be overly violent or cursing or sexual. But this didn't feel like that way. It felt like someone who was really trying to do an epic, beautiful adventure. You know, there's a reason Genndy Tarkovsky is considered one of the great animation directors of his time. And this pushes it to such a degree that you really cannot deny him being one of the greatest filmmakers of our time. I mean, this is as much of a shot in the arm as Fury Road was to a certain degree. But just the exercise of it, but the intensity of it, just like how swept away I was by it, just like I've watched it twice now, and between the times I remember it so well, there's things I've seen between it that I'm like, yeah, I guess that happened, who cares? But like, partly because I saw Primal and that was so good, but it is just such a beautifully amazing thing, so well drawn, so well told. I just can't stop praising it. I just love what it's doing. But I love that it has both an emotional story to it, a stakes to it, a clarity to it, and it's able to take me to this crazy intense world, but it's almost is just trying to be what cinema and animation can do and pushing that to a level that no one's maybe asking them to do right now. I think there's been a lot of talk I've seen lately of people saying like, well, who cares if something's shot beautifully, because so many things are shot beautifully. What are you doing with it? And I think in a lot of ways, yes, Primal is very well animated. Yeah, maybe it is the animation masterpiece of 2019. Sure, all those things, but what it's saying for visually is, how are you able to be this beautiful, but every time you're saying a certain emotion? No shot is wasted. This might seem like the most masturbatory idea, of testosterone you can imagine, but every shot, in terms of a visual exercise, just every shot is completely important to the story, completely telling what it's going to do, completely brought back, and also showing awesome stuff, also showing like how beautiful they can draw with this. Also, who's gonna just have cavemen designed by Bob Camp out of nowhere, but it looks so fucking good? Who cares? It's not just like a break in style, but it just shows you that like Gendy loves animation. I love watching people love their medium while making something, while pushing it to a level that no one's asking it to be pushed for and blowing everyone away. Primal is just like one of the reasons I love cinema and I love movies and TV, is when you get things like this that just like evaporate everything else in its wake because it's just so fucking good. So my number one movie of the year, I think when I get to this part, I always think I want to do something that's like a real stone cold classic. Like one that I really think like, you look at it later and go, yeah, that was a good number one. And as soon as I saw this movie, I knew it was a classic for the ages. And I thought it was just a truly fantastic sort of movie. I was thinking about it. It was surprising. It was a real crazy experience seeing it. It was said so much, and I don't even think I liked this director that much before I saw this movie, which is equally surprising. But I have to admit, it's a truly fantastic motion picture, and it was the best thing I saw this year, and I can't deny that. And I think your number one should always be that, and that is what I felt with this film, which is Parasite. There haven't been a lot of movies that I come out and I'm sort of in a daze because I'm just like, I was so transported by it. And I've seen maybe a lot of clunkers, at least in theaters, or films that didn't totally take me over. This one so did. Like, I wasn't thinking about anything else other than this movie, and it really took me whole. You never are sure where it's going. It kind of plays with its own language to definitely not make you expect what's going to come from it, while also saying all these different things. This is definitely a film I want to rewatch again, because I kind of want to see where all these things are coming from, possibly, as well as just like, it was such a great movie. It's the kind of great kind of art house foreign film that kind of breaks out, not just because it's really entertaining and it's really, I think, audience friendly and stuff like that, but it's also just like so exceptional at being a broad, big movie. For the most part, those films don't become what this has done rather well, and I can understand that because you kind of want to talk to people about it. It's a very like word of mouth type of movie, but in an exciting way. Parasite is really about a family who is poor. They're not making any money. They had to take a job just putting together pizza boxes just to make some sort of money. And then a friend offers the son a job teaching English to a rich girl in her house and being her tutor. He gets in there and somehow gets his sister a job as the tutor for the younger son, like an art tutor, and then gets his father instilled as the driver after they find a way to fire the driver, and hit their mother into being the housekeeper after they get rid of the housekeeper. He has to make up these lies like, oh, well, it's my cousin's friend, or she'll say, oh, I know this like responsible driver, or I think the last one they made like a crazy scheme about an agency or something. Like, they really just kept it so they had no clue these people were related. And I mean, and the saddest part is like, they put this whole scam together to get jobs. This isn't a spoiler, but there's no like safe with like a diamond in it or like a lot of money or something. Like most times you see a scam movie, the scam is like I brought up Hustlers earlier. They're scamming people to get monetary value. And in this, the saddest thing about it is they're scamming these people to make ends meet. Like, They are not taking their credit cards. They're not, they're not like living high off the hog or whatever. They're putting forth all of this effort just to simply all be employed as a family. And there is a desperation to that I definitely understand, but there's also a total sadness to the fact that they feel like they've sort of made it by putting forth all this effort to scam this family into just doing well enough to have like Wi-Fi and cell phones and stuff. That I think really hit me, because I don't think they love these jobs. This isn't like earth-shattering, like this is my dream job sort of job. This is just like so they have any sort of money. And I think, they don't necessarily like love these jobs. They just love that they have jobs. And I think that's something they kind of don't tell you when you grow up, is sometimes I think you might not necessarily love or like your job or anything, but you just sort of have to have it to survive. You have to find any way you can to kind of get into it. And Parasite gets that desperation so well, that fight to just like keep things going. And that is probably one of the smartest things you could say about the wealth disparity, is that there are certain people who are feeling very relaxed, can take a nap during the day, can put on a huge party, can decide to everyone's going to go camping for their kid's birthday, or all sorts of nonsense that costs tons of money, and they do it at a whim. And these people are just like, what if we just were able to call people and eat food? And they have to put forth so much effort into that. All right, so those were the best movies of 2019, according to this guy, of course, because I'm talking, so you should know that. But anyway, that was it. I'm sure, get mad in the comments or be like, yeah, that was cool or something. I don't know. These lists are fine. If you want to check out any of the reviews, full reviews of these were clips in the video, of course, check them. Those will be in the description. I think it's been a really good year for me personally. I moved this year. I started live streaming, which a year ago I don't think I ever thought I would do. I know I compliment people watching my videos a lot, but I have to say I have a really great audience who's able to go with me wherever I want to go and is cool about it. And it was a crazy year. It was an intense year, but it was a good year. And I think it was a good movie year as well. I didn't get to see as much as I would like, but I got to see a lot. And I think this was a good movie year. I'm interested to see, so many Netflix. How many Netflix do I have on here? At least 2. Yeah, okay. Only 2 Netflix on here. But we're going to see more of the prevalence of Amazon Prime and Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus and so many things, from The Mandalorian to all these things. I will have a worst of the year. That'll be coming out soon. Thank you all very much for being with me. If you are newly subscribed, check out those reviews. Check out other reviews of 2019 movies. I reviewed most of the notable ones. And I hope 2020 is even better. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. Who knows? But 2019 was a good year. Not an overly crazy, fantastic year, but I think it was a really good year and a notable one in film history. And we'll see if 2020 can live up to that. But it's nice to appreciate the year that was. Think about what we all got to see in 2019. All right, so if you would like me to know what your favorite movies of 2019 were, or your top 10 or whatever, then comment below in the comments. Leave your top 10 movies below in the comments. I'm actually going to, maybe I'll tabulate them later and do something on my on Movie Crap Live and kind of tabulate, what in the comments was the #1 movie of the year, or the top 5 or something like that. So let's do that. I don't know. Unofficially, I'll figure out how to tabulate those when I have the data, but leave that below, what your favorite movie or your top 5 or top 10 were, and we'll go from there, and I'll figure it out. That'll be fun. Why not? Let's do it. I just literally came up with this while I'm shooting. Anyway, do that below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to.